Okay, we're gonna have to keep on our toes now, Jade.
Don't worry, Uncle Page. We'll just take some pictures and get home.
Have you ever played Beyond Good and Evil? I know at least someone out there answered that with a resounding yes, because fans of this game have been starving for more of it for 20 years. Those poor souls would even put faith in Ubisoft if it meant they get to bask in the warm green glow of those eyes again. It may come as a surprise then, since I'm apparently such a nerd that I make videos on YouTube about games, that I can't count myself among them. I've never played Beyond Good and Evil, despite gaming since long before it came out. It's been held up for over 2 decades as one of the most underrated gems in gaming history, so I thought it might be a nice time to see why so many people love it, and see if it deserves its status as a cult classic. Now, cult classic is an interesting term. When I hear it, I think of something that a small portion of the population really likes, even if that something is lacking in mass appeal. I could sit here and talk to you for literally hours about how much I love Psychonauts, though it wouldn't be fair to call that a review. I already love Psychonauts. I don't actually know if it would be fun to play for the first time in 2024, because I'm already used to the slippery controls and the weird platforming. I adore the chunky Tim Burton type art style and the quirky characters. That well is long poisoned by substances I'm not allowed to talk about on YouTube.
I am the milkman. My milk is delicious.
I'm telling you this because for those who already love Beyond Good and Evil, I want you to remember that I don't have the benefit of rose-colored glasses to look through. As someone who grew up getting most of my gaming news from magazines or store racks, Beyond Good and Evil was something that I was always aware of and heard good things about, but I generally ignored it when I was younger. That was largely because I read that it sold poorly, and to my especially stupid child brain, a game's sales and popularity were equivalent to its quality. Now I know better. Maybe it's for the best that I did miss it, or I might be standing in line right next to the rest of those fans, begging Ubisoft, "Please sir, I want some more." On its surface, Beyond Good and Evil is a game about a girl with green hair and a pig man taking pictures and fighting aliens. But beneath that, it's a parable about the search for truth, the dangers of propaganda, and how it can be used against the population, the incredible value of honest journalism to a society, and its importance as a balance against those in power. It's a tale of a military-industrial complex taking advantage of a crisis, stoking the flames of fear to overtake a democratic government. It sounds more like an American history book than a game, but apparently the developers did use 9/11 as an inspiration, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Beyond Good and Evil's lead developer was Michel Ancel. Pardon my terrible French. As an American, it's the best I can do not to put on a shitty, cartoonish accent. Ha ha ha, wee wee, that kind of shit. Ancel was an early hire at Ubisoft, joining in 1988, but he gained widespread recognition in 1995 as the creator and lead designer of Rayman. As of this writing, Ancel worked on several other releases after Beyond Good and Evil, including the 2005 King Kong tie-in game, but he quietly left the games industry in 2020 to spend time on a wildlife sanctuary. This happened to be around the same time he was being investigated for allegations of abuse and creating a toxic work environment, but that's probably not related. Either way, those claims don't appear to have gone any further, and as far as I've read, no one was accusing him of sexual deviancy or stealing breast milk.
I am the milkman. My milk is delicious. Special delivery today.
It sounds like he could have just been a terrible boss, but we'll probably never know. As far as Rayman goes, you can throw that on the pile of series that I missed the boat on entirely. But while researching for this video, I learned that its early games were dramatically more popular than I thought. In the 2 years after the release of the first Rayman game, it had sold over 900,000 units globally. It was the highest selling game on the PS1 in the UK and the second highest in the PS1 in France by the year 2000. This is all to say that Michel had earned a reputation and the trust of his company to lead a team and create a game of his own vision after creating a massively successful franchise. I'll paraphrase a little for brevity, but I'll put the links to the interviews in the description if you'd like to check them out for yourself. In a 2003 GameSpy interview, when asked about the main inspirations behind Beyond Good and Evil, Ancel said, "There were 2 different desires after Rayman. The first was using the virtual world. In most games, the feeling of freedom is fake. There are walls. It might look like you can reach somewhere, but you can't. The other idea is trying to tell something meaningful. It's not just about beating everybody, it's about maybe getting something from the game. It's a bit pretentious, but there's a story, there's a meaning. He goes on to specify the freedom is not in the big plot of the story. There are only 5 big story events in more than 20 hours of gameplay. It's the events between those points where you experience a lot of freedom. You get money by taking pictures, you get money from the racing parts of the game, you can choose different ways to go into the next story point. So the freedom is not in modifying the story, it's about the freedom you experience between the big parts of the story. Unfortunately, that desire for freedom outran the limitations of schedule and budget. According to Ansel, he decided to cut out large sections of free exploration after he didn't like how it was done in Wind Waker, which, okay, Wind Waker sold over 4 million units, which is apparently actually not that great for a Zelda game. But still, I loved Wind Waker. Beyond Good and Evil reviewed well and won awards, but it sold terribly, some would say catastrophically. And I wouldn't be surprised if it was held up as an example of what happens when you stray from the status quo in game development. I can imagine some executive pointing to a picture of Beyond Good and Evil and saying, "Just keep doing what sells," and "Players hate female protagonists." Ubisoft themselves said that they didn't advertise it well, and they put it out into a massively hostile market with games like Jak 2, KOTOR, Silent Hill 3, Call of Duty, Ratchet & Clank 2, my beloved, even their own Prince of Persia, Sands of Time. All of those games were trying to get under that same 2003 Christmas tree. It sold so poorly that retailers almost immediately slashed the price, which is always a great look on a new game. I saw a Reddit post that said they were so desperate to get rid of the game that copies of it were included for free in packs of mozzarella cheese. So what chance did Beyond Good and Evil really have? Whether you were a kid or an adult, what were you going to choose? Most players never took the chance to try the game for themselves. Their opinion, much like my own, and the narrative around the game itself, was written for them before they ever saw it on a store shelf. It's really hard to find sales numbers for games, but the estimates that I've found look like Beyond Good and Evil sold around 500,000 units across all platforms, and I don't know what the time frame for that was. But for comparison, the numbers I could find for the other games would say Jak 2 sold an estimated 2.5 million, Ratchet & Clank 2 sold over 3 million. By 2005, KOTOR had sold over 3 million, and Prince of Persia, Sands of Time, the other Ubisoft game that they released at the same time, sold 2.4 million. It was a devastating failure for Beyond Good and Evil, and at this point, the development of the sequel has taken so long that it's just further reinforcing the narrative that the original was bad. If the first one's so great, then why can't they put out the second one? That's a straw man I made up, but it would be a hard stance to argue with. Beyond Good and Evil still deserves better. So now that you've got the context, we can talk about the game itself. Beyond Good and Evil takes place on Hellas, a planet largely covered in water, and as far as we're shown in the game, a planet that only has one city. That city is also named Hellas. It's kind of a New York situation. Floating on the edge of civilized space, the citizens of this backwater are a mixture of humans and humanoid animals. Their economy was largely built around mining materia crystals, but mining operations have ceased as the planet is currently in the midst of a war. The game opens with our protagonist, Jade. Jade lives in a lighthouse that also serves as an orphanage. Along with her adoptive uncle Paige, she cares for the children who lost their parents in the war, most of which were abducted by the Doms. For fans of the game, Jade is often held up as a really great female protagonist. She's caring to the kids, loyal to her friends, brave in the face of danger, and capable in a fight. In short, she's a heroic female figure the likes of which we still don't see often enough, and this one came out in 2003. Today, Jade is meditating by the ocean with a kid. Get it? The kid's a goat. Never mind. The peace is shattered as the sky splits open and the Doms begin another attack. Jade runs to turn on the shield generators, making it in time only to be told that the electric bill is overdue and their power is being shut off. The Dom's meteors rain down on the orphanage. One lands in front of the children and they all fall into a crater. A group of Snatcher aliens emerge from the hole, already holding the kids. Jade doesn't hesitate. She grabs a stick and starts freeing them, but she's captured by a monster known as a Spirit Eater. At the last moment, she's saved and we're introduced to her Uncle Paige. Together, they finish off the rest of the invading aliens. Now that the threat is neutralized, the Alpha sections show up with a reporter to take the credit. Jade is confused, but Paige is more than happy to give some candid feedback. Paige is a really interesting character, and I do like him, but I think he suffers from the cuts that the devs had to make. At this point, we know that he's someone who cares deeply for Jade. After all, he literally just jumped out of a window to save her. He's a talented mechanic, and 20 years ago, Jade's parents left her with him. He's raised her alone ever since. Jade knows that the Doms will attack again, and she needs to find the money to keep the shield going. Luckily, her AI assistant, Secundo, has found a job for her. Aside from being an accomplished martial artist and a questionable dresser, Jade also enjoys photography. A local scientist needs pictures of every species on the planet, and she's willing to pay Jade to get them. I love this mechanic, not only because it deepens Jade's character by giving her a hobby, but I think it's a great addition from a gameplay perspective. It adds another system of collectibles that actually rewards the player instead of just being a Ubisoft checklist, and it encourages you to really take in some parts of the environment that otherwise might be lost in the blur of pursuing the story. The only criticism I have for it is that because the enemies disappear when they die, you usually have to snap a picture of them as soon as they show up or risk missing them, and that does throw off the flow of combat. Beyond Good and Evil does its best to juggle several different systems with varying levels of success. Combat, stealth, photography, puzzles, racing, air hockey, none of these are really polished as much as I would like, but they break up the pacing and they reward the player for engaging with the game in the way that they enjoy. Except air hockey. I legitimately hate that game, but thankfully I never have to do it unless I really need that pearl. And spoiler alert, you don't. Jade grabs her camera and gets a start on the creature catalog in her own backyard. There are several bugs and birds, her dog, and the various humanoid races of the children if you want to get them all, but you can just leave if you'd rather do that. The mail comes and you get a second job offer. Jade's got another person wanting to give her money for pictures, and unlike me, she doesn't even have to take off her shoes. Paige seems reluctant for her to take on the job, and she tells him that he doesn't have to go, but even though he clearly thinks it's a bad idea, he's not going to let her do it alone. It's a nice character moment, but I couldn't get over the feeling that he was hiding something from me. Jade and Paige get the hovercraft running and set out. They call it a hovercraft, but it's really more like one of those swamp boats with the big fan on the back. Steering the boat can be a little floaty, but it's not a big problem outside of some of the races. We get a tow to the Mama Go garage, and no, I won't be doing the accent, and I assure you, it is difficult not to. Paige doesn't like these rhinos very much, and I'm getting the feeling he doesn't like pretty much anyone very much except Jade, but they serve an important role in the game. You see, these guys are MacGuffin vendors, and you'll be coming back here every time you need the next special something to move through the story. Now with the hovercraft up and running for real, no takebacks this time, we can finally— oh, hold on, the Doms are attacking again. This is the first of a few vehicle-based boss fights, and honestly, I didn't think they were particularly fun, but they're also pretty easy, so at least they weren't offensive either. I wish I could say that the game is using it to change up the pace a little, but we haven't had a chance to set a pace yet. We just keep hitting spikes of action without a chance to breathe, and I think that's probably down to the exploration sections being removed. Once you kill the flying spine monster, it's a good time to roam the city, find a few pearls, and get the word on how people feel about the alpha sections. When you're ready, make your way to Blackrock Isle. And this is probably a good time to break off for spoilers if you're so inclined. I won't be getting super in detail, but I will be going through the story and whining about things as if I could do any better. You know, YouTuber stuff. I do recommend playing the game for yourself if you haven't already, but really, if you were worried about spoilers, you wouldn't be here, right? When we arrive at Blackrock, we meet with the driver of one Mr. DeCastellac. This shy guy wants to pay Jade a large sum of money to delve into the abandoned mines and snap a photo of two Dom's creatures that are said to be nesting in the depths. Delve those depths we do, finding a fancy new wrench for Paige and some tacos in a vending machine. I do not recommend eating those. This place has been abandoned for years. After photographing and then beating the absolute dog shit out of the local wildlife, we find the two creatures that turn out to just be one creature. Jade and Paige double team it, giving it a good pounding until it becomes flaccid. and they don't even have a chance to towel off before the driver comes to pick them up. PB&J aren't too happy about being misled, but it turns out that Mr. de Castellac wasn't even real. That somehow makes it okay, but it seems like more misleading. This was all actually a secret recruiting test for ISIS. I mean the Iris network. They want Jade to use her skills to expose the truth about the Alpha sections, and they're willing to pay her. Jade gets the reward she was promised, and the password for the Iris headquarters. Back in the city of Hillis, in a secret base under the Akuta Bar, Jade meets with the rest of the Resistance. Now, I wasn't completely sure who was evil before this, but Iris has a cat girl, so it's gotta be the other guys, right? Either way, this is the team I'm on. They tell Jade that one of their other agents, codenamed Double H, was sent on a mission to infiltrate a factory that they believe the Alpha sections are using for nefarious activities. They lost contact with him a few days ago, and want Jade to find out what happened to him and finish his mission. We get the upgrade to shoot down the drone that was preventing us from going into the factory, but we can't get at the elevator yet, so we'll have to settle for some light puzzles instead. We find a man being tortured, but don't hurry to help him or anything. Take your time and line up a nice shot for the papers. There's a Pulitzer on the line here. Whenever you're ready, give him a hand. His eggs are a little scrambled, but it turns out that this is Double H. He puts on his heavy armor and pledges to help in any way that he can. He then immediately falls off a ledge into deep water. I'm sure he's fine though. There's no time to check, we've got more scoop to scoop. Jade has to leave Paige behind for some climbing and sneaking. She finds that the hundreds of crates on these conveyor belts are actually full of people. The Alpha sections are using the factory to traffic the kidnapped civilians, but before Jade can process this, a commotion breaks out behind her. She rushes back to Paige, but she doesn't make it to him in time. He's been captured by the Alpha sections. Emotionally shaken and now alone behind enemy lines, Jade vows to continue the mission and to save him. It's a really cool moment that reinforces that not only is Jade a capable, badass protagonist, but also deeply loyal to her friends. So it's a shame that she almost immediately finds herself with a new companion, Double H. Now this isn't meant as a knock against Double H. For the time that we get with him, I like his character. He kinda reminds me of Kronk from The Emperor's New Groove. The problem is, replacing Paige so quickly sucks a lot of the tension out of him being captured. For the rest of the factory, Double H isn't even really with you. He's just on the other side of a wall and talking to you for emotional support. But Jade already decided to keep going, and she didn't really need the emotional support right now. It would have been a lot cooler to have Jade go through the factory alone, vulnerable and surrounded by enemies. With Double H along for the ride, even if he's not directly helping, Jade isn't alone anymore. So I don't have a ton to say about Double H because he doesn't really get much of a character arc or a story. He's still suffering from the torture that we saved him from, but he is absolutely dedicated to helping his people, and Jade. He has a strong sense of duty, and I can really appreciate that they didn't take the easy road and treat him like some kind of thick-headed moron, even though he does have the cognitive difficulties. He's constantly quoting Carlson and Peters, and that's the handbook apparently for training in the Hylian army. It's all about how a soldier should conduct themselves, and seems to be the only thing he can really remember. I'm not gonna lie to you though. This is a weak part of the game. One of the many plates that Beyond Good and Evil is trying to keep spinning is a stealth system. Now I don't really like stealth games anyway, but the stealth in this game specifically isn't really challenging or fun. The AI is brain dead and has a very limited field of view, so it just winds up being slow and kind of boring. You could just sneak by all of them, but my personal challenge just became, I wonder if I can kill all these guys without them catching me. We make our way through a fairly large factory, stopping to pick up Paige's boots from a locker. Keep this in mind because we will be coming back to it. And then finally we get to see what the Alpha sections have been hiding under their helmets. It turns out that at least some of the victims that the Doms kidnap are injected with mutating spores that turn them into these sludge zombies. At the top of the factory again, Jade is too late. She sees Paige being loaded onto a ship and overhears an Alpha Section soldier reporting to a Dom's priest, further confirming that they're working together. Jade is noticed by the priest and it summons the Megazord, which means it's time for another boss fight. This one would be completely unwinnable for a mere human with a stick if it didn't stand over that conveniently placed hole. Double H joins in to help, and this is when I would have liked him to come back. Jade is strong, but even she can't do everything alone, and this would be the right moment to reinforce that she doesn't have to. We drop the boss and escape the factory, but again, Jade can't catch her breath because Double H is dying. Does it seem like the game has a bit of a pacing problem? Well, there's no time to think about that either, because a clock is running down and you have to get Double H back to Iris headquarters before it hits 0, which is actually pretty easy. I really appreciated that when you return to town, the people have taken notice of your investigation. The propaganda has changed, and some citizens are protesting the Alpha sections in the streets. Your progress in the story has a tangible effect on the world, and that's really cool. It reminds me of how New York would slowly become more infected as you progress through the first prototype. Double H barely makes it back to the Iris hideout, and he's on the verge of death, infected with a Dom's parasite. They inject him with a serum and save him, and go ahead and add this to the pile of things that we're keeping in mind for later. They tell Jade that it'll be several weeks before Double H can be up and working again, but then immediately they tell her where she needs to go next and dump a massive pile of pearls on her. Wouldn't you know it, this is just enough pearls for the next hovercraft upgrade. She walks out of the bar, and as far as I can tell, still in the same cutscene, Double H follows us out. I guess he's just super dedicated and gonna push through the pain? Our next hovercraft upgrade lets us jump over the lasers that were keeping us pinned in this part of the map. But before we can do the next job, we have to unlock the 3rd hovercraft race, which means completing the first 2. Thankfully, you don't actually have to win them, you just have to get in the top 4, and that's really easy. And then you start the 3rd hovercraft race and look for a place where you can get out of the track. That gets us to the next mission, the slaughterhouse. This area is actually one massive building split into 3 smaller areas, and you can do them in any order. But they really aren't worth going through in detail. Everything that was boring about the factory is still a problem here, and it doesn't help that the interiors look so similar and take so long. Stealth slog your way through it, unless you like this kind of stuff I guess, in which case you should stealth enjoy it. Once we're done, there's still no sign of Paige. We'll have to get back to Iris and figure out what to do. When we make it back to Hillis after another successful job, the protests are getting more intense. Hovercrafts are crashed in the waterways and crowds of protesters line the street. Jade finally meets the mayor face to face. The tension is broken when the leader of Iris sends a message. Up until now, I thought it was this guy, but nope. It turns out the real leader just hasn't called for several weeks. Jade is shocked to find out that it's Paige. Remember how he didn't want her to take the job back on Black Rock?
You know this DeCastellat guy?
Huh? Can't go there, Jade. Smells like a trap. It's too dangerous.
Are you loco? We need some dinero to protect us from those stinking dons.
Don't you worry, Paige. Everything will be fine. If you want, I'll go alone.
No, it's just okay, we'll go together. But I'm sticking to you like bees on honey, whether you like it or not.
I guess he knew it was a recruitment test. He's been leading the resistance for years and kept it a secret from both Jade and the Iris members. Even they didn't know who he was. Iris gives Jade a pearl necklace. Wait. No, I think that means something else. They dump a hot load of pearls on her and we have our next target. We're going to the moon. Only one problem. Our ship can only jump about 5 feet. Luckily, before Paige was captured, he gave Jade a disc. And if you remembered to watch it, he tells you that he hid a spaceship under the lighthouse. You can find the codes to get to it on the bottom of his shoes. These shoes that you picked up and it showed you the bottoms of in that cutscene, and there was no code on them. It's right there in white paint. How could you miss it? Don't you feel stupid? Find the ship and you'll see that it's not ready to fly, but you only need one more part, and Paige even tells you where to get it. I'll give you 3 guesses where you go to get it, but you'll only need 1. And it's a good thing you just got all those thick white pearls. If you haven't already been, then this is a good time to get in some exploration. There are several optional mini dungeons around the town, and even one of those chase sequences like they use in Uncharted that are really just a Crash Bandicoot level. Another trip to Mamago's for the stabilizer will get you flying, but while Jade was gone, the Doms attacked again, and with no one there to protect them, the children have all been taken. Jade blames herself and seems almost ready to give up, but Double H reminds her that it's not too late. They can still save the kids. You can fly now, but not to the moon, so if you don't have enough pearls for the final upgrade, there are a ton of extras just lying around. If you talk to the cow at the bar, he points you to the volcano for a hidden treasure. It's full of enemies that rain down even more pearls for no discernible reason. I mean, that's not fair, it is discernible. They cut a bunch of content. Back to the rhinos one last time, and now we're ready to go to space for our final mission. This is a point of no return, so stock up on healing items if you can. There's literally nothing else you can do with the money anyway. The lunar base might not go down in history as the best level in gaming, but compared to the 2 sneaking missions, it is a breath of fresh air. There's almost no stealth and a cool new aesthetic. We find Paige suspended in a cell, surrounded by walls that we can remove with a light puzzle. With the puzzle solved, Jade is finally reunited with her closest friend. But again, she's too late. Paige's body lies cold and lifeless on the floor, but Jade's mission isn't over, and the world needs her. She promises to return for him and pushes on. After reaching the heart of the enemy's lair, she finds the Dom's High Priest meeting with General Keck of the Alpha Sections. This is the last piece of evidence we need to spark the fires of revolution and save her planet. Now, if you can forgive me, it's time for me to be negative. The High Priest is commanding the Alpha Sections to bring Jade to him, but he calls her Shawnee. She's the only thing that matters. On their way to the transmission tower, Jade gets a call from Iris. They've heard from the leader again. Paige is alive. But what about the body we just saw? Was it a clone or some kind of doppelganger? No. Chasing Jade across the bridge is Paige, in the flesh and back from the dead. But how? Well, Jade healed him with her secret magical powers, of course. This is the point for me where things fell off a cliff, and I hated it. I legitimately said, out loud, "You've gotta be fucking kidding me." Here's the thing, my sexy viewer. Maybe you feel differently, but I despise the Chosen One trope. It is almost never done well. I don't want to play the child of prophecy who will save the world because God thinks he has a nice ass. I want to play Joe or Jill Schmo, the random nobody who rises above extreme circumstance through their own power. I want to see a normal person reach inside of themselves and find the strength to move a mountain. Not because it was their destiny, but because they told the mountain to move, and in the face of their indomitable human spirit, the mountain had no choice. But here we are, and I guess we've just been demoted to Chosen One, so let's get it over with. It was only on the way to the transmission tower that I realized that there had been a time skip. Paige tells us that he was in the torture chamber for 3 weeks. So I guess that fade to black before Double H followed us out of the bar was actually a lot of time passing. As we begin to send the photos back to the planet, the system locks us out and all seems lost. But my man Secundo, the real hero of this story, convinces the computer to give us the access we need to get the truth to the people. We send the pictures back to Hillis, and the peasants are revolting, but they're also starting to riot. The job isn't over though, because we need to save the citizens still trapped in the core of the base. Jade attempts to fly back to where she literally just was, but first we have to deal with great value Darth Maul. We destroy his spaceship and then we go in to release the tractor beam. While we're in there, Keck wastes his last words, calling Jade a loser. He tells her how nothing she does matters and everyone she loves is dead, including Paige. But he's downstairs. Then he doesn't even die in a cool way, he just got impaled on some rebar. Lara Croft does that shit 6 times before breakfast, you sissy. We return to the lair of the Dom's High Priest, and he tells Jade that Paige has been hiding what she really is. That the humans stole the source of his power and put it in a living body to kill him. He was able to survive by consuming the humans, and he's been searching for her for decades. He's going to kill the human part of her now and take his power back, but Double H steps in to save her, and now it's time for the final showdown. I have made my distaste for the narrative direction of this ending pretty clear, but I have a special level of hate for this fight. The Dom's High Priest is the final boss of the game, and I think he sucks for 2 reasons. 1, the fight itself is miserable. The combat system in this game has always just been okay. Jade looks pretty cool while she's fighting, but the camera sucks and the dodge barely works. Combat was always just one of the many plates that the game is spinning, and while it's flashy, it's also clunky. That was okay because with only a few exceptions, you're generally fighting mobs of smaller, weaker enemies, and you're also not alone. You have the secondary abilities of your companions to knock them up or stun them. If you had to fight the Alpha Section's soldiers, it was usually because you had failed at stealth, but combat wasn't the intention. The second reason I hate this fight is probably even more subjective, and yes, I am aware that the first part is also subjective, but I hate that this game has a final boss at all. Beyond Good and Evil's finale is a multi-stage fight, and you might as well have just made it another fucking hovercraft race. It doesn't even have the decency to be a normal fight. The quote-unquote challenge is to hit the boss 10 times in a row while he teleports around without letting him hit you. If he does, you'll lose a bunch of health and the hit counter starts over. Then, once you've done that, you have to do it again, but with your movement controls flipped, because that's fun. And by the way, if you didn't know when you went to space that you were going into the end game, you don't get to go back. So if you didn't bring those extra healing items I told you to buy, congratulations. You get to fight against this boss over and over and over until you can do it without getting hit. Or you can load an earlier save and do the whole damn thing again. I know some people got this on their first try. Good for you, I'm happy for you. But it took me like a half an hour to get through this one fight, and it sucked every last bit of wind out of this game's sails. It is such a terrible, mean-spirited design decision that I just don't understand it. But anyway, the priest dies and Jade uses her new god powers to save everyone. The DOMs and the alpha sections are defeated and everyone goes back home. The credits roll over the lighthouse full of pictures of Jade and Paige and the kids, until finally we see Paige standing alone. He looks down at his hands to see one of the Dom's parasites growing out of it, and the screen goes black. Dun dun dun! Except, we've already established that they have medicine that fixes that, so he could just treat it like a case of the clap and be back to normal in a few weeks. I don't know if there's a solution for what we got here, but personally, I wish they had just scrapped the priest fight entirely. Go back to when Jade was hiding in his room, have her sneak around and solve some puzzles, you know, like the rest of the game. Find the switches to activate a system that shoots all the captured citizens out in escape pods or something. Then self-destruct the base with the priest inside and escape in the beluga all before a timer runs out. We've already established these mechanics. On the way home, you can fight General Keck in the big spaceship battle because I thought that was actually in line with the rest of the game's vehicle boss fights, and it was decently done. Let the army catch Keck after his ship crashes back on Hillis. The Iris agents and the mayor can all be there with the escape pod carrying the orphans. And then everyone cheers and you cut to the high priest, partially buried in the rubble. Slowly zoom in on him and his eyes snap open. There you go. It's a decent ending with a setup to Beyond Good and Evil 2. In stores near you, 2006. I'm sorry that so much of the ending of this video has been so negative. I just think it deserved better. A better conclusion, better sales, and a better legacy. But hey, that's Beyond Good and Evil, I guess. I still think it's a great game. If it wasn't, I would just say that instead of being frustrated by its shortcomings. Jade is a fantastic character, and I really enjoyed how well the game kept things fresh with all the different ideas and mechanics, even if some of them didn't resonate with me. Looking at the game as a whole, and through the eyes of a player in 2024, it is kind of a mess. The characters are well developed, the story is interesting, and I liked the photography mechanic, but everything else ranges from just okay to kind of tedious. That's not to say that the game is bad. I enjoyed my time with it up until the ending, and I absolutely think it's still worth playing today. I can see why it has such a following, and if I had played it when it came out, I'm sure I would have loved it too. But the pacing is all over the place, and you can definitely tell that large sections of the intended game are missing. Thankfully, Beyond Good and Evil isn't lost to time like a lot of the other games that didn't sell all that well. Ubisoft is more than happy to parade its corpse around, changing the paint job for some quick cash. But the team that created this boldly aimed for something that hadn't been done before, and they fell short of that, but it was still good. That heart isn't at Ubisoft anymore, and I'm not talking about Mr. Ansel. This was Ubisoft in their indie phase, but they could never make a game like this today. Even though they have so much development talent, upper management wouldn't allow it. They're too big, too corporate, and it would cost too much money. They'd stuff the new game full of microtransactions and radio towers and force a multiplayer mode that no one asked for. One day, Ubisoft might push out a game and call it a sequel, but it'll be something unrecognizable. And that's why I'm sad to say, there will never be another Beyond Good and Evil. Thanks for watching. Hey, you know the video's over, right? I mean, I'm down to hang out, but I know you got better stuff to do. Plus, I mean, if you made it this far through my video, are you okay? You doing alright? You know it's gonna get better, right? I mean, statistically, it has to eventually, if you just hold on long enough. I guess people in the Great Depression who stuck it out felt pretty good when they got to the 70s. This punishing yourself by watching my terrible content, that's not the way to go. Anyway, I would do the whole call to action bullshit, but first off, it would never work on someone as attractive and well endowed as yourself. And secondly, I just really hate that shit. But if you want to subscribe, I do enjoy watching that little number go up, and it doesn't matter either way, because if you made it to this point, then it's too late, because YouTube's just gonna keep putting me in your timeline. You're screwed either way. Alright, I'm gonna go work on something else now. As always, thanks for watching. Later.